Welcome, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Goldstein, and I'm the president of the Municipal Art Society of New York. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this installment of Person, Place, Thing with Randy Cohen, featuring Ford Foundation President Darren Walker. I want to thank the foundation for hosting us in this beautifully restored auditorium. Isn't it the cushiest auditorium you've been in recently? The Ford Foundation is one of MAS's generous donors, and we are grateful for their thoughtful support. MAS is overjoyed to present this fifth MAS installment of Person, Place, Thing. The radio program is an interview based on the idea that people are particularly engaging when they speak not directly about themselves, but about one person, one place, and one thing, which is of particular meaning to them. The result, surprising stories from great talkers and thinkers. With past speakers including author Jennifer Egan, fashion designer Yoli Tang, Landmarks Preservation Commission Chair, shouldn't use all that alphabet soup, and Commissioner Sarah Carroll, and Union Square Hospitality CEO Danny Meyer. MAS is honored to continue hosting these conversations that celebrate our city and its people, places, and things that inspire us. Before they take the stage, I'm thrilled to share some background on both of today's guests. Unfortunately, the podcast's usual host, the fantastic Randy Cohen, has come down with COVID and will not be here this evening. We will certainly miss him. But for the first time, Person, Place, Thing in history, we will have a guest host filling in. Randy has invited the wonderful Jami Floyd to take the stage in his place. Jami Floyd is an American journalist, legal and political analyst, and television and radio host. Her experience spans local, network, cable, and syndicated television, broadcast radio, and digital media. She is nationally and internationally regarded as an expert on law and politics, especially where they intersect. She reports on sports, culture, and civil rights. And today's guest, who probably needs no introduction, Darren Walker, is the president of the Ford Foundation, an international social justice philanthropy with offices right here in New York, in the United States, and 10 regions around the globe. Because running a global foundation apparently doesn't keep him busy enough, Darren has also worked on some of New York City's most critical issues. He co-chaired New York City's Mayoral Advisory Commission on City Art, Monuments and Markers, and served on the Independent Commission on New York City's criminal justice and incarceration reform. Before joining Ford, Darren was the vice president of the Rockefeller Foundation, and in the 90s, he served as the COO of the Obsidian Development Corporation, Harlem's largest community development organization. Earlier, he had a decades-long career in international law and finance at Cleary Gottliebstein and Hamilton and UBS. He has been included on numerous leadership lists, as you can imagine, including Time's annual 100 Most Influential People in the World, Ebony's Power 100, Out Magazine's Power 50. Most recently, Darren was named Wall Street Journal's 2020 Philanthropy Innovator. On behalf of MAS, we thank you, Darren, for your unwavering commitment to New York City. We appreciate everyone for joining us this evening, and now I'm happy to invite Jami Floyd to the stage.
A very big thank you to Elizabeth and MAS for this wonderful partnership and these wonderful events. And a big thank you in absentia to Randy Cohen, my dear friend and the host of, I think, going on 400 Person, Place, Thing podcasts. And as Elizabeth so well explained, we are soon going to get to know Darren in a whole new way as he contemplates here his person, his place, and his thing. And he's going to, on the spot, tell us what they are. And we'll talk with him about them and get to know a whole new side of Darren Walker. But this is also a radio show, and so a show, as Randy likes to emphasize, we have music for you. And we've brought tonight a wonderful musician, the New York City-based guitarist Rashad Brown. Sit back and enjoy.
Sweet little honeybee, baby been sweet on me. Sweet little honeybee, oh my queen bee. She rocked me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She's strutting now, shaking some. Watch my baby, look at her run. Strutting now, shaking some. She's dancing, she's having fun. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my own. Honey in the honey pot. Whoa, in the pot is hot. Honey in the honey pot. Whoa, in the pot is what you got. Whoa, to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. Ooh, yeah. Sweeter than a honeybee. Oh, baby, she's been sweet on me. Sweeter than a honeybee. Oh, she's my queen bee. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul. She rocks me to my soul.
A wonderful warm-up, Rashad. Thank you so much. And we're going to get right into it. Ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
Or I should say blues and soul after that. Your person. Who is your person?
My person is James Baldwin.
James Baldwin. When did you first encounter the writing of James Baldwin? Or perhaps I should, if we're talking about Baldwin, I should ask the voice of James Baldwin.
I encountered the voice of James Baldwin when in college I watched a film that included clips of James Baldwin's debate with William F. Buckley at Oxford. Mm-hmm. And I was mesmerized by this black man who was so profoundly confident in his intellect, in his capacity to present himself, his ideas, and to when attempts by Buckley to intimidate him, he, without any equivocation, stood his ground, which infuriated William F. Buckley, because someone of Buckley's time and place and background would never expect at Oxford to be challenged on a purely intellectual and oratory level by someone who was superior to him. And Buckley's sense of supremacy was there for everyone to see. And attitudinally, he was responding to something he was ill-prepared for, encountering a black man who was his intellectual equal, and probably an intellectual superior. And so for me, as a college student in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas, who was gay, black, like Baldwin, grew up poor and with a rather dysfunctional family, I so resonated, and I just wanted to know him and who he was.
So what then did you do to get to better know who Baldwin was and still is?
Well, at the time, for any of us who were taking American literature, 20th century literature, at a college like the University of Texas, Baldwin was not on the curriculum of the great 20th century writers. But there was an elective. There was something that you could take where you learned about those other writers who, while not being significant enough to be in the core curriculum, you could take a class where you would encounter those writers. And fortunately, there was a course on the Harlem Renaissance writers that was an elective. And I took that course. And it was when I fell in love with Baldwin, when I fell in love with Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and so many others. I had never read, well, I'd never read any piece of literature by a black author that dealt with homosexuality. And so Go Tell It on a Mountain was so liberating. And in so many ways, it opened my eyes to all of the amazing way in which Europe, France especially, the place of this part of the world in the firmament of black creatives in the 20th century, and certainly during the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s. when so many of America's most talented Black writers, dancers, visual artists left America in order to be able to pursue their passion, their craft, their love of the arts, which they were constrained. And certainly Baldwin was among the most constrained and conflicted about how he felt about America. I resonated with Baldwin's sexual identity. I also resonated with his need to find a way to cope with the twin phenomena of rage and love for this country. And Baldwin was never fully at home in America. And he was tormented by that. He was tormented by the fact that he didn't believe he was a beautiful man, or that his features made him ugly, in his own words, and unlovable. I couldn't relate to that because I had an amazing, completely loving mother who gave me what Baldwin didn't have, which was full-on love and support. And that unconditional love, Baldwin never felt from his family. And Baldwin was always in search of it. And I thought about, there were times when I, with my wonderful partner of 27 years, thought about how lucky I was because I never questioned whether my David was fully in love with me. The way Baldwin, in his writings, in his poetry, in his talks to gay groups, and in which he would feel this sense of insecurity that bled into every aspect of his life. And as artists, we know artists, our greatest artists, are insecure, and that's what makes what they create so completely alluring and captivating to us. But I loved James Baldwin, and I think about him often because he walked the streets of New York. He loved walking the streets of New York. He loved this city. And I feel that way about New York. I love this city, and I love walking the streets. And I, after 40 years, find it intoxicating to be a New Yorker and to see the things that we get to see on a daily basis.
Walking the same streets and in the footsteps of Baldwin.
It's why I moved to Harlem, and people in 1992, when I lived in Midtown, New York, in a nice apartment, said in 1992, "Have you lost your mind? You're moving to Harlem." Now, today, of course, we laugh because most of us can't afford to live in Harlem.
We laugh at them. All right, we are going to take a break, hear a little more music, and then more from Darren in just a moment.
Try it, whoa, you like it. watch that man standing there pointing his finger, just like a bee. He's getting ready to sting you. Health, wealth, and freedom wouldn't be hard to find. But how you gonna get it together with chains around your mind? We must all work together. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, we must help one another. Whoa, whoa, try it. Oh, you like it. What the world needs now is just a little more love. Whoa, 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 try it. Oh, you like it. What the world needs now is just a little more love. Whoa, whoa, try it. Yo, you like it. What the world needs now is just a little more love. Can't be no love. There's nothing but pain inside. Can't see no love when you're looking through too much pride. Oh, health, wealth, and freedom, it wouldn't be hard to find. How you gonna get it together? Put chains around your mind. We must all work together, yeah. We must help one another. What the world needs now, why, it's just a little more love.
Darren Walker, your place.
My place is Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson.
Which at first seems an unusual choice, but I think when you explain it, it will make a lot of sense. Please do.
Well, I believe that Thomas Jefferson, his home, are one of the same. And first, through an analysis of Monticello, you really understand Jefferson. It is an intellectually, architecturally dazzling in its intelligence, the depth of research and planning and knowledge of Palladian architecture, of scale for the property itself. And so it's genius as a piece of architecture. And it is magical. It is majestic. And it also was constructed by hundreds of enslaved people. And those enslaved people made Monticello what it is. Thomas Jefferson, too, as a person, was almost a polymath. I mean, the breadth of his interests in art, architecture, literature, politics, diplomacy, agriculture, ecology. I mean, he had an insatiable curiosity. And he was a beautiful craftsman of words, particularly words that spoke to the aspirations of this nation, that continue to inspire. And yet, like the house, which is so alluring, there is a dark side, a deep and profound dark side that, from the looks of things, one would not see. And that is by design. I often think about Monticello as it became known as a public site, as a museum, a place to tell Americans the history of this country. And one curious data point is that when Monticello opened to the public, there were no residue in any physical way of the structures that most of the enslaved people lived in. In fact, what was there atrophied and was razed. And when the Monticello Society opened the home to the public and docents told the story of Monticello, no one talked about the enslaved people. No one acknowledged in the scholarship the facts of Monticello that Mulberry Road, the little road that the enslaved people lived on, that it ever existed. And when there was a reference, it was to Mr. Jefferson's servants. And Monticello captures me because I look for symbols that are metaphors. And Monticello is a metaphor for America because it is majestic. It captivates our imagination. It is so beautiful. It is so well designed. It represents the highest ideals in architecture. I mean, the notion of Palladian design goes back to the antiquities. And like Jefferson, we don't think about the enslaved people in Rome, in Greece. During these times when all of this was being made, when we read and talk about Western civilization, and like America itself, Jefferson, the sort of two faces of Janus, the beautiful light, which when you read the words of our Constitution, of our founding documents, that Jefferson was so critical to drafting and using his political might to push through those words that he wrote. he did not live by those words. He did not live up to his own noble vision for America in the way he lived his life. And Jefferson, like America, when challenged, said, well, I know that we have a problem. I know that this isn't right. But this is really working for me. I regret it. I regret that this is what it takes to have the lifestyle that I've created for myself and my family. And to be able to have a fine house, to entertain elegantly, to lead the life of luxury that I lead. I regret, and it is unfortunate, and I know it's morally wrong to enslave other human beings. But this lifestyle that we have created depends on them remaining in their subhuman, as we have classified them, status. Because otherwise, we'd have to rethink our privilege. We'd have to actually give up something. And while it troubles me, and I, as a person who lives a life of ethical, as someone who preaches the ideas of the Enlightenment, I simply cannot reconcile that I would have to give this up in order for the words in this Constitution to be realized by all Americans. That's simply not achievable. I'm unable to do that. And I think as I look over the history in our country and even today, when people, particularly people who are wealthy or privileged, are challenged, what is said is in some ways a modern day version of what Jefferson said.
A through line from Monticello. All right. Reflect on that as Mr. Brown plays our next selection.
We're a winner. You never let anybody say, boy, you can't make it, 'cause the feeble mind is in your way. No more tears do we cry. We are finally dried our eyes, and we're moving on up. Lord have mercy, we're moving on up. And I don't mind leaving here, show the world that we got no fear. We're a winner, and everybody knows it too. But just keep on pushing, like your leaders tell you to. Moving on up. Lord have mercy, we're moving moving on up. Unless that blessed day's come, and I don't care where you come from, I'm gonna move on up, moving on up, woo, moving on up. No more tears do we cry, and the blackbird's finally dried his eyes, and we're a winner, and everybody knows it too. We just keep on pushing, like the leaders tell you to. We're a winner. Moving on up, moving on up, moving on up.
Darren, your thing.
My thing is a painting. It's a painting that is, in the context of art history, the most important painting that is foundational to modern art. It's a painting by the artist Manet, and it is an amazing painting, and it is called Olympia. Manet's Olympia is an iconic painting because of the visual representation, the composition, and the subject. It features a woman lounging on a chaise, and
Nude.
she's quite provocative.
She's nude.
And for,
She's a white woman.
well, she's French, and she is what was called in the literature at the time a courtesan. She might be called a sex worker today. It is her comfort with her nudity that in some ways made the painting so scandalous.
I was going to ask about the controversy.
Well, the controversy was that a painter would present a woman who was seemingly very comfortable with her body and would be partially dressed. I mean, because she has a flower in her hair, and she has a beautiful. There are beautiful things around her that would indicate that this is a woman who has some money. I mean, she clearly gets money from somewhere, and she's lounging, and she has a woman presenting her with a bouquet of flowers. And when you learn this painting, so much of it is about the woman and this idea that she is beautiful and she is confident and her body is there and she's in this sort of obelisk sort of, and that someone, is it a courtier? Is it a man who is fond of her, or is it a client? I mean, someone is sending her. A lover. It could have been, I mean, there was great speculation about who sent the flowers that this woman is. And this painting is one of the most studied. I mean, there have been more doctoral dissertations on this painting, probably more than any picture in modern art, because it is a painting that is foundational, and so much was derivative of this picture.
Now, I mentioned her race. I know people in the audience are thinking race isn't a part of everything, but I mentioned it because the other woman is a black woman. The other woman in the picture.
Yes, well, the
bringing
woman who is
Presenting.
handing the flowers to her, but throughout art history, there has never been any interest in knowing who that woman was. So there is a woman, another woman in the picture with her, and the interest of art scholars, the interest of museum curators, the way in which the painting has been taught, the black woman, while prominent in the picture, is invisible. She is invisible in art history. As I say, there have been thousands of dissertations and entire books written about this painting. And the woman is nameless, is without any regard other than as an object holding the flowers, which was the source of tremendous interest. Where did those damn flowers come from? I mean, who sent her those flowers? Were they sent, or did she have a flower garden, or did she have a florist, and did she send them to herself? The conjecture over decades of inquiry into that painting, no one seemed to care about the black woman until 2014, and a curator, an aspiring curator, who was getting her PhD at Columbia, wrote to her dissertation advisor and said, I want to know who this woman was. And
the black woman.
Yes, the black woman.
The other woman.
And the curator is also black.
Bravo.
And the curator, her name is Denise Morel, she was shocked that as a scholar of modern art and as someone working on her dissertation on Manet, that she couldn't find anything out about this woman. And so, thousands of footnotes later, she realizes that she's going to have to literally do the sleuthing to find out. And she, in fact, did. She found out that her name was Laur, L-A-U-R, that she, in fact, was part of a coterie of black women in France, in Paris, who were mostly from Martinique and from the French Caribbean islands, and who had made Paris a home. And in fact, were friends with, hung out with these artists, were a part of their lives. But there was no documentation in the canon of modern art of their existence.
I could say so much about Laur, but I won't, because I want to give the audience a chance. We have microphones set up at either side for anyone who has a question about this painting, or Monticello, or Baldwin, or anything else you want to ask. Darren Walker, is that allowed? Can we step outside the person, place, thing rubric?
Happy to step outside of
So
person,
please, if
place,
you have
thing.
questions, come forward. It is interesting, I will say, as people think of their questions and come forward, what you say about this painting, because I find myself drawn to Laur. As a black woman, I find myself, yes, I know you're thinking, is she a black woman? My mother is white, my father is black. I identify as a black woman in America because that's what we do here. And so I find myself, of course, I look at the white woman and I identify with any woman in any painting as a woman, but I find myself intrigued by the black woman. I want to know who she is, and her facial expression is extraordinary.
Well, you want to know who she is because, like any person visiting a museum, you want to see things that you relate to and in which you see yourself, which is why sometimes I am surprised when people say things like, why is it so important that we have to have black artists doing black portraiture? You know, is that identity politics? Is that changing our museums? People always want to see on the walls of museums things they can relate to. When the nouveau riche bourgeois American woman would go into the Metropolitan Museum and see a great Gainsborough of some Duchess of Marlborough standing in her, that's who she wanted. She identified with that woman. She wanted to be Consuelo Vanderbilt. She wanted fine clothes, and it was, she was seeing herself. And you can say that about all of art, Western art. And I think it's deeply unfortunate that the idea that we are now being more inclusive so that we can all see things we can relate to on the walls of our museums, that is not about political correctness. It's about excellence. Because for the average patron to any museum, you do want to see things. This is what museums do. Museums play back to us who we are. They tell us what matters, what's important. And so if someone says, well, but why is it so necessary to change our museums to include more things? Because in a diverse democracy, when these public institutions need to fulfill their mission, audiences are going to expect to see things that they can relate to and see themselves on the walls, just as audiences have always done.
Related to that, and noting that you advised the mayor on statuary, and thinking of you walking through Monticello, how do we reckon with, now obviously, statues that went up during Jim Crow to frighten our people, that's different. But how do we honor our history truthfully and still see? I was just in Louisville, and Thomas Jefferson is featured prominently there in Louisville,
And I
Kentucky.
think that that's great that Thomas Jefferson is featured. Thomas Jefferson should be featured. I think what is going on at Monticello is actually quite interesting.
Say a bit about that.
Monticello has fully embraced the full humanity of Thomas Jefferson in all of his complexity. And so everything from the docent scripts to the literal $20 million investment to rebuild Mulberry Row, the way in which the treatment of what had been the unmarked graves of the enslaved people that were literally a half mile out by a parking lot have been elevated. One of the great landscape architects, Tom Woltz, has been hired to transform that space into the kind of dignified, reflective space that a burial ground, particularly of the people who made the entire enterprise possible, should be and should look like and should be experienced.
And
so
they were denied.
They were denied. They were denied, as I said, dignity. No headstones, no markers.
And in life.
Well, of course, in life, they were, their humanity was, I mean, we black folk in this country were categorized as subhuman because that was necessary. It was necessary to consider us chattel because morally, these were all, for the most part, upstanding Christian men. And so morally, how could you justify doing what they did to our people and have any sense of morality? And so it was a way of explaining and of rationalizing an immorality, an immoral act of catastrophic implication. And for the people who did it, it was, though, necessary. And it's why in the history of this country, it has been so hard to reconcile. It is why it took a century to get our Congress to apologize, just apologize for slavery. Not ask anything attached to that, but just to simply say, America as a country is sorry that this happened. And it's hard for some people because when they look around, as Jefferson did, he said it, I'm sorry, I wish, but look around this estate. This plantation couldn't have been built without them. I think much of America, we rationalize. Some people are unwilling because subliminally, subconsciously, we've internalized that while it was horrible, it was necessary. We couldn't have built this country. I love the line in Hamilton, the many, many brilliant lines, but in the cabinet meeting, and there is the rift between Jefferson and Hamilton, and Jefferson is lecturing Hamilton as Hamilton is presenting his idea for a national bank. And Jefferson is saying, this is the problem with you Northerners. You believe in debt. We Southerners, we don't believe in debt. And Jefferson is then told by an astonished Hamilton, well, of course you don't believe in debt. You don't pay for labor. Hey, neighbor, a lecture from a slaver. No, thank you. And so what Jefferson was saying in a very kind of a pompous way is, we Southerners, we don't need your Northerners' idea of this bank because we don't take on debt in the South. Well, of course you don't take on debt. You don't, the most expensive input to everything that you've built is labor, for which you don't pay. And so there is something in the American narrative that is the difficulty of reconciling that truth with the truth, right? The truth that, yes, enslaved people built the White House, built the United States Capitol. None of us were ever told that on our tours and our history books because it's just a very difficult inconvenience. And it's difficult to reconcile with who we say we are. And this is Jefferson's dilemma.
So in the 2 minutes we have left, I want you to quickly tell folks about the reconciliation that you helped Monticello begin with the rededication ascending. We say descendants, but we're ascending. And you were there on Juneteenth, and it is perhaps the beginning of a new day, at least in that one place that represents America.
Well, it was the largest gathering of the descendants of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. And what was absolutely beautiful and glorious about that day was to see hundreds of Black people, of families, of children, of grandchildren, running about the lawn and the house, and the joy and the pride that so many people felt, and their histories, and knowing that Monticello, the board of Monticello, which, by the way, now is chaired by a Black woman, that the organization itself had fully embraced its history and had moved away from the denial, the self-denial that prevented them from embracing the truth that Thomas Jefferson had children with this enslaved woman, which generations of historians discounted and discredited. And we now know through technology that it, in fact, is the truth. And as Jefferson himself said, the truth will set you free.
Bravo. A brilliant way to end. I want to say a very big thank you to the Ford Foundation for this hospitality, Rashad Brown for your wonderful music, and especially to Darren Walker for his generosity of spirit, delightful conversation, and important work in the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.